Good morning. It's Christian Hermit. Well, I just about got myself duped, um, as I was, learning about discernment of spirits in a deeper way of the interior life, and even how demons will get involved in our prayer life. But they do get involved in our temporal lives, and they will try to dupe and deceive us. And so yesterday I had done a video. I had seen yet again where this person had just made up things. And I had listed out, I have the paper here somewhere, I'd written down just maybe 3 things that the person had written regarding canonical hermits. And one was even, trying to say some book that made it seem like it was official, and it's just written by people. An editor and 2 co-authors. In other words, 1 writer and 2 co-authors, and their interpretations of some things. And then that person used that as the basis for how the person could make these statements about hermits, canon law hermits in the church. And it just got to me, and I thought, no, people need to know the truth and to learn to discern how to read something online or listen and discern if it is of truth, which would be of God, truth, beauty, and goodness, or is just a human being's made up, just drawn out of thin air. That person's ideas. The person was going on about how long it takes to get canonically approved. 3 to 4 years if you're already an existing hermit, say in a monastic setting. No, it doesn't take that long. Maybe in that person's mind it could. But no, Thomas Merton was immediately, Saint Charbel was immediately told he could be a hermit. No, it doesn't take long for an existing hermit to be able to be approved as a quote-unquote hermit or canon law hermit or a hermit in the church. And it doesn't take 5 to 12 years for other people, for somebody who's interested in the hermit life to be approved. I know of bishops who have approved within 3 months. And one of them was back 39 years ago. It wasn't even a year since the canon law was made into law that 2 women were canonically approved as hermits, right in the diocese I'm in. So, no, we have to be careful of what we pay attention to, because people like that are forming the rubrics or making up rules for a law. But then I realized I had been snared, the devil, because it's demonic. Untruth and dis-ease, things that aren't implemented very well. And I have repeated many, many times, Canon Law 603 itself is beautifully written. Beautifully written. In fact, it's so well written that I follow it. I've followed it and lived it for 25 years and will continue to live the canon law. Plus, the Catechism 920 and 921. Beautifully written. How hermits are to live, and it's based on whoever wrote that. One of the bishops, or probably some committee that the bishops assigned it to, wrote the canon law and wrote that the catechism sections on hermit life. And they're wonderful. They're great. They're inspired even. I think it's beautifully done and taken from the hermits of the last 2,000 years, how they lived their lives, what the fruit was of those hermits. The saint hermits, the ones that were canonized even, who certainly didn't even have to be approved by a bishop. They just lived their hermit life and were holy and were made saints because of it. But now is this canon law, and it's become the way for any legitimate legal hermit or a hermit who wants to be consecrated, or by the norms of the laity and the clergy and the bishops in the church. They view canon law 603 as the legitimate way to be a hermit. So that's why I say people should go ahead and be canonically approved. But God, I am convinced, God does not want me a canon law hermit. It is not implemented properly. And there's people making up things that are creating their own rules that then get adopted by people because the person sounds very legitimate and is and repeats, but then reels back in, changes their positions and back and forth. Consistency is needed. And there are canon law hermits, many of them who aren't remaining, they stick out like sore thumbs. They look like religious order sisters and brothers and give themselves titles accordingly. And then they have justified that they are the same as religious sisters and brothers, the same as monastics. And that's why they're justified in giving themselves titles and being honored and respected as such. Hermits never wanted that for 2,000 years, nor before Christianity and Judaism. Hermits, prophets lived as hermit lives. They had a ministry from God of speaking God, being God's voice on earth to people, when God would give them messages that they were to proclaim or to state on behalf of God to his people, to God's people. And hermits today, I have a ministry, but I'm a very honest person, and I will always speak truth, even if it alienates me from even the Catholic Church. I know right from wrong. I was brought up as a Christian, and I know that there's a tradition in the Catholic Church of being mean, persecuting mystics, people with spiritual gifts. Others don't like it. They have envy, or they resent, or they are suspicious, or they've read about what people did to mystics in the past, and they think gives them license to act like that and to be rude and just test. And, well, how far can we go with this person? It's as my spiritual father said, you're born like a chick. The other chicks sense there's something different about you, and they're going to peck you to death. He always protected me, my spiritual father, this priest of nearly 17 years before he died. He had been a priest just about 72 years. Within 2 months of it, I think, or it might have been 73. He might have been in his 72nd year as a priest. He was 99 and a half when he passed, and had been a priest early on in his life. So he'd been around the block. He knew things. And he was a very holy priest. But he stayed clear. He stayed clear of what we called the temporal Catholic world. When people get more involved in the temporal aspects of church and in the rules that are made up by humans, which are necessary rules when you have a huge multi-million group church. Yes, there has to be order, there has to be consistency. But when our focus is on the temporal and on the externals, and that includes in a vocation such as the hermit vocation. So I have discerned, and I've given many examples, and a lot of them comes from this person who for 17 years just makes up things and then establishes it. And she says she got her bishop to agree that she could make up these postnominals, go after her name, to give extra recognition and extra status, like MDs or Juris Doctorate or PhD for such, a doctorate, someone with a doctorate. All different initials after the name that designates that they have higher degrees or even postgraduate work done or certain distinction or honor in the academic world. But a hermit wouldn't want that. I don't, if I have to be out somewhere where I have to give my name, I do not call myself Dr. So-and-so or use my postnominals that were bestowed on me. I graduated with high honors. I don't go around, pointing that out or writing my name with postnominals or Dr. So-and-so and then my postnominals. I'm a hermit. We're to be humble and hidden. And our purpose is God, is love of God and to learn love. To learn God is pure love. But God is not without truth and consistency and stability and honor that is innate. And it is not of he does not, Jesus did not boast. He did not just make up things. He taught because he was God. He said what taught his teachings, but he was assertive. He wasn't an aggressive person, but he did not lie. He did not just willy-nilly make up things and then change his positions if it made him look bad. If he said something that wasn't truthful and then someone else called him out on it. Jesus, that wasn't Jesus. Jesus is God. Jesus is perfect. But he was assertive. And he spoke truth. Today is the feast day of Teresa of Avila. She happened to be very outspoken. And she was assertive. And when she realized that things were not properly being lived in her own convent, the Encarnacion in Avila, where she became a Carmelite sister, and she was going along with how everybody else was living it. It had become tainted in her time. The Carmelite regulars, as they later became known. She reformed the Carmelites, and it's called the Discalced Carmelites, OSCD, or no wait, I forget what initials they have after. It signifies discalced, without shoes, the more severe, the more austere. How the Carmelite order was originally created way back early on. They were very of the strict observance. OSO is the postnominals for Carmelite, of strict observance, because she reformed her community, and she got run out, called terrible things by the other sisters. And people in Avila were all up in arms. What is she doing? This is terrible. She's trying to destroy the Carmelites. No, She was making a point and deciding, am I going to live like a socialite with honor and respect and social status, and the parents would send money and pay for their fine eating, and even some of them had their servants, their maidservants with them in the convent to take care of them. It was so different, so off kilter from how the Carmelite order had been established centuries before. And Teresa of Avila became increasingly aware. What am I doing? Is this religious life? No, this isn't right. This isn't austere. This isn't learning scriptures or prayer life or obedience to God. No, so she began living that way herself in her convent, and the other women did not like it. They were angry because they liked their comfortable social life and the esteem they had of being a religious sister. And people would come and visit with them and bring them treats and things because they were religious sisters. But Teresa then got literally run out by the other sisters, and she had maybe a handful of other of her fellow sisters who realized also that they too wanted to have a true vocation as a religious, not this mockery that was being lived. And so they were run out at night, even under threat of being burned to death. And she started her own order, the Carmelite Order of the Strict Observance, called short nickname Descalced, meaning shoeless, more austere. Very focused on a life of prayer and of living the faith, living Christianity, living the scriptures, very close to Jesus, and in other words, doing it right, just doing it right. And that's what I want of my hermit life. I don't want to be respected or esteemed or given any special place or noticed. I want to live as the saint hermits lived 2,000 years ago or 1,800 years ago. Saint Macarius, Saint Anthony of the Desert. There were two Anthonys. One had so many people come that he left hermit life and started monasteries. Another Anthony went further out into the desert and they couldn't find him. That's the Anthony that I talk about, who I want to be like him. And he had some followers, he had some disciples, and he taught them. But it was the way of the hermit vocation that would be imitable of the prophets and their hermit lives, or of John the Baptist, who lived an austere life, very focused on truth and goodness and beauty. And when he was a precursor of Christ, and he had been teaching people the way to live, the correct way of goodness, of a religious solidity and truth. And when Jesus came and he realized that this was the Messiah, John the Baptist immediately followed what Christ said and how Christ said to live. And that's how the hermits live, but in a more austere, extreme way. It's like being a Carmelite or a Carthusian, except being a hermit. Austere, straight on, dedicated to Christ, in love with Christ, learning to be and desiring to be one in God's pure love. So I took down my video immediately because I realized that I had been deceived. I had fallen into the devil's trap of even trying to point out the falsehoods, just the reality of how this person would mislead and make up things, like how long it takes to be canonically approved. I suppose trying to discourage you all who are applying for canonical approval. I think you should apply for canonical approval if you want to be legal and be consecrated. If you don't mind not, and not being considered legitimately a hermit in the Catholic Church today, then that's fine. People don't know I'm a hermit. I don't need to be approved, or I realize, and God, I think it's one of the grandmother of the neighbor man who helps me lift things and helps with the dogs if I get a gut attack and things, unless he's sick. Last time he was sick, terrible sinus infection. But his grandmother texted me the other night and wanted to know, how are things going, because she and her grandson are one of my references. And I said it's not going, that it's been, at this point, 12 and a half weeks of nothing. And I realized then from reading about the person assigned to be approving me or discerning me for the bishop hadn't followed through on anything, one phone call, but hadn't, and wanted my vows and things, which I immediately sent, signed by my spiritual father, who witnessed and who was the facilitator of my beautiful ceremony way back, 2 decades ago. So more than that, more than 2 decades. So that it'll be 24 years in December, but I've lived the hermit life 25 years as of September 13th. So I said it's not, and she wrote back, she says, well, is your spiritual life the reason that they're balking? Because she said, how people can be about toward people with spiritual gifts. And I said, that may be. I don't know. I think more. His leadership style, and he had some difficulty adapting. He's a new priest, fairly new, and his leadership style doesn't lend to being able to multitask, to do like 2 different tasks at the same time. So he's focused on something else, and he is very, very busy. He has lots of wonderful ideas and good ideas, and but to implement those can take time. And if you're not experienced yet, and your leadership style is such that you aren't comfortable maybe delegating or things like that, I don't know. I just read, there was an article about him in the diocese paper a year ago that I read, and that gave a lot of insights that he himself was talking about the problems he was having, and that he'd been sent to a pastor boot camp to get help, to get some added training and some help with learning how to administer and do what he needed to do as a pastor. So an ability to say no, or to be assertive, and I hope to delegate and to, but then I all of a sudden, as I was going through this and explaining the situation with me, but also what this person writes and just makes up and then backpedals sometimes. When I'd call things out, the person would start to backpedal or make up things that they hadn't said that when they had, or they hadn't written it when they had. I mean, it's all in blogs. I realized, God, I am not this person's keeper. Her diocese is to be supervising, her diocese isn't. They never have. I called them, unless they've started to, but per the person's own blog. No, a religious sister of some community in another city is her director, and evidently doesn't find a problem with all that, what the person's doing. And I find a problem when I get off track with it, with the temporal stuff of it. And the made up, like even how long it takes to be approved. It was maybe it took her, I think she said something like 25 or 23, I forget how many years she said it took her to get approved. I don't know. But then, of course, she was also insinuating that I would not be approved and that they weren't telling me because a bishop and the other people in charge were too worried and unable to tell me why, because I'm so unfit and unwell. This person tries to insinuate some pretty nasty things about me. And no, my bishop is very mature. Bishops would not be in their positions if they were weak and couldn't figure out to say no to someone and give them the exact reasons why. So no, that's not the reason. It's they haven't done anything. The young priest hasn't. He's been busy doing other things. And the hermit vocation is not his interest. And an old lady isn't a priority. A hermit's vocation in the minds of many is not important. And that's okay. But through all of this other crud that goes on, and when I see online all the different canonically approved hermits, including a transgender one, who took a bishop just a short while, maybe a couple months or so to approve that one, or even less time to approve him. And I'm not opposed. That's gender dysphoria happens. The person had their reassignment surgeries, hopefully isn't confused anymore. But it's running a problem with the teachings of the Catholic Church and with Scripture. So, they've got that problem to deal with now. But no, I know of several hermits that online you read about them. Within a few months, they're approved. So don't be discouraged. You just can't pay attention to what you read online. No matter how credible the person appears in a habit or has a title or anything. Now, I have read now that other hermits are justifying that they are the same as religious, and they say that because they are in the consecrated life of the church. But the way it's worded in the catechism, a non-canonical hermit, a privately professed hermit, could be considered in the consecrated life of the church. But this person has made such a big deal about how only canonical hermits are consecrated, to the point that now it's being repeated online, even in Wikipedia. Her things are stated as fact, as if fact. So I've thrown in the towel on canonical approval. My request is in. If my bishop had had the request, he would have had it dealt with already. I find him excellent. So he's my favorite bishop of the 3 dioceses I've been in, including this one. This is the 3rd. He is my favorite because I have followed what he does. He is very astute. He's an excellent leader. He is a very spiritual bishop. and also very kind, very Christian. He's very Christian. And he's very focused also in the spiritual, not just a temporal administrator type bishop. So I really admire him. And I thought I could write him. I'm not going to bother with it because I honestly don't think that God wants me connected with, so far, the flawed Mercy. My puppies are playing. So she's jumping on the bed trying to get her brother to get excited. They're like kids. He's got a ball thing that she wants to pull with him. And another little orange toy that he's got under his paws that he's sort of teasing her about. So they're like kids. They are, I will say, having pets, even though they do make, I have to get up early, I have to take care of them and all, and think of something other than myself, which is a good thing. But they also get me laughing, which is important. Because with the amount of suffering I have, it's not something that you just feel like, ha, 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 laughing. It hurts too much. So, but no, I don't think God wants me connected also with people who are not living the vocation as it has been for 2,000 years, but also just how they act toward others. And that pride and stuff, it's not Christian-like. And so we do need to discern. We do need to know the Bible and study Jesus' teachings and know what truth, beauty, and goodness is, know what love is. And I decided that my video yesterday had just fallen into that trap of the demons that are swirled around how the canon law is being implemented. It's not the canon law itself. It's how people are living it that is very inconsistent, and often some basics of the law itself, the solitude, the silence, and the hiddenness aren't being, well, the hiddenness is in the catechism. I include that. I follow the catechism, what they say about hermits too. And I live my life like that. It's not being followed, not by the bulk. And that bothers me because we have to discern. We have to discern. Is it holy? Is it being lived? It may be holy, but is it being lived in a holy manner? Are the bishops even supervising, or is the diocese even supervising all of them? And do they understand what solitude means? Or if not, why are these bishops letting people, or even helping start, quote-unquote, religious orders of hermits? Because you lose a tremendous element of what a hermit learns spiritually. The dependency, the dependency on God through the silence and the utter solitude. So that's my discernment. It's not the law itself. But today, again, there's just another big tirade from someone who watches my video and then goes to this other person and carries on how angry they are and want to write to my diocese and, and say how sick I am and perverse and wrong and bad and should never be approved. God, I think, has decided he doesn't want me involved in that, in the canon law, because it's tainted by the people who are not living it with the humility and the solitude and the silence and the hiddenness not standing out and not representing themselves as something that they aren't, but then justifying it, quoting some female canon lawyer, which is fine. Men and women can be canon lawyers. You don't have to be a priest to be a canon lawyer. But quoting some person and using that person's idea to justify saying that they're a religious, or a handbook of canon law title, I look it up and it's just written by people. We could write it. I could write. You could. So we have to discern what we read, even if the person is approved as a hermit even. Like you discern what I say. And that video, you could discern that I had been duped and got off into something that was not of God. And so that's why I took it down. 5 people viewed it, and I apologized to you 5. I didn't like it as soon as I had posted it, and quickly, 5 people had, maybe within 10 minutes, and realized this isn't God's will for me. I'm not to even worry about what happens with that beautiful canon law. If it's being administered properly, if the people are being supervised, if the bishops themselves don't understand what solitude means, or don't understand hiddenness in our time period, it means to pass unnoticed. That's how we can be hidden. But it's so many of these hermits are articles written about them, and then they further state these things that aren't how the saint hermits lived. And they had fruit. They had spiritual fruit from their hermit lives. That's what I want. So if the Catholic Church doesn't want me, and in my life it has seemed that that God has had me in the Catholic Church to learn the spiritual aspects about His real presence and the sacraments. But God seems to have allowed the church, people in the church, to push me out. And that's fine. It's like I'm in a progression. God showed me that long corridor. Maybe I'm toward the end and God is taking me into another phase of being in His church, but not the temporal one so much. I'm to be learning God is pure love. And physically, God has me. I can't go and sit. But a family member who has this business, they had an arson, a 14-year-old boy. He's been arrested, criminally charged. He arsoned their facility, their business, and I've been asked to go and paint. They need it fast, and they can't find some. And I had helped the other night with a paint project, and my family member texted me and said, they were so impressed with you. Well, they saw this 73-and-a-half-year-old lady up on a high ladder doing some detail painting on some pillars. I guess that must have impressed them. I fear not. I fear not dying. I didn't fear falling off. I always just ask, Lord, if I do fall, please make it terminal. I've already had death. I'm not fearful of death. It's beautiful. I look forward to it. I won't hasten my death, but I don't fear doing things. I didn't want my family member up doing that and risking her life or her spine. Mine's already toasted. So, yes, so they knew that I was a good painter. And they said, get your mom to paint. They're going to pay me even. So I'm going to go tend to that. It's sort of I consider it an act of charity, a corporal work of mercy, because they need someone quickly because they're having a big event. Has to be done by Thursday. So I just have today and tomorrow. and I have to use a special smoke and fire blocking primer. So I have to locate that and get that and go do that. And pray for me that my body can hold up okay. My headache won't be too bad, and so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to offer it for the boy, that he get help, because he's obviously maybe a little junior psychopath and a pyromaniac. I don't know, but he needs help. And I'm glad he's caught early at age 14 and not 24 and gonna be in prison for years. He'll probably be in juvenile detention for probably 18 months or maybe longer. But maybe he can get some therapy there or something and get some help. Maybe the judge will order him to have help, enforced help. But as far as the other, people will say what they want about me and denigrate me. It's happened before, even in the first parish I was in. The priest became so angry and envious. He'd even say, "Why don't I see things how you can see things? Why don't I should be the one with the gifts. I'm the priest, And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Why do you have these?" I said, "I don't know. You'll have to ask God that. I don't know." I said, "I never asked for anything. I was born this way." And it is hard. It's a hard life, especially in the Catholic Church. They are enough aware, even the lay people are enough aware of mystics. And boy, your life is made pretty miserable by people who otherwise are good people. But somehow they think that they're free. It's a free for all on someone who's a mystic. They can just be horrible to the person and run them out and shun them and lie about them. In my own hometown, I used to sort of make a joke of it. I said, well, what they don't know about me, they just make up. Not the ones that I grew up with in the Protestant church, but the Catholics, because they knew enough. See, the Protestants, they didn't recognize, they don't know about mystics. Mystics isn't a thing in the Protestant church. And that got thrown out, I think, with the Reformation. Mystics, having anything to do with mystics. But a couple of them who were sort of on to me thought it was, do you have ESP? Are you extrasensory perception? Are you psychic? And with that, they could sort of cope with that. But Catholics don't handle mystic well at all. I'm a lived experience, not while you're alive, not unless I would have the bleeding stigmata or the gift of healing. If it's something marketable that will bring people in, or is, like, wow, look at that blood in their wound areas, There aren't many, but there's some stigmatics out there. A man in Michigan just died maybe 10 years ago. As an older man, he was maybe 62 when he received his stigmata, and it was very legitimate. But they did not beat him up about it. His priest and his bishop, they were very respectful. It was really atypical. Padre Pio just went through hell. He went through hell with his stigmata. And with being a mystic, he had, some of his confreres, some of the other friars were very envious and never did like him. But others learned to respect him and love him and even be protective of him. But that's not what God has for me. God has for me crosses and trials, and I don't want to get emotional, but just run out. But in the case of even my request, I let them do it. I don't do it myself. I did not say I'm retracting my request. I'm not. I said it's in there. I wrote, but I was very direct about it. And I said, it has come down to this person, doesn't have my consideration or my lifelong vocation as a priority. That's a truth. It isn't a priority to the person who is tasked that by the bishop. And I don't think the bishop realizes that this person can't do two different things at once. So he's focused on the seminarians. Well, they're close in age to him, and he knows some of the older ones. He was in seminary with some of the older ones, so that would be old, be ready to be nearly ordained. So that's a priority for him. And it's a worthy one to work with the seminarians. But it would have been nice if he had wanted to even send me an email that, this isn't my priority, or they even had me, they didn't have a process, so the chancellor asked me to write one for the diocese. And I did. It took a long time. I developed an excellent process, and it's arduous. And it is geared so that if someone really doesn't have the vocation, it will show up early on. Or if they need to wait or live the life for a few years before and reapply in another year or something. And they wanted I developed a questionnaire for them, and I did it on 2 tiers. And it's, but I realized by then that out in the world, and they're already implementing and doing their own approval processes, and it just is a mismatch, not a mismatch, but a mishmash of whatever any bishop wants, like the one who approved the transgender within a couple months, and another one in another diocese who's approved 4. And he did it within 3 months with some, and I don't know how quick with the others. The others, he got better at it, and didn't, grew from making mistakes with the first one he approved. But no, they just, and that bishop does it himself. He does it himself. He doesn't turn it over to someone else. But a busier bishop will. However, I think my bishop could have had it done very quickly. And if you aren't even going to meet the person in person and talk in person, you're not going to get a real sense. You have to look at body. I was also going to do for them list of questions when they interview a person, and also interview techniques and what to look for in an interview. I've been on interview teams in the professional world, in school districts. So that's how I know these things. It's not that I know from, being a hot shot. It's because I was trained. That's all. And I was sharing what I've been taught and what I learned to do. And then also my doctoral areas, organizational leadership. I have a gift for organizing things. I was my brownie president all the way through Girl Scouts. The other kids sensed it in me. And I'd have all these ideas, and I would get the stuff done as a little kid. And when I was 4, I organized neighbor kids to build a hut in my backyard. I'm an organizer. I'm a shaker and a mover. I will see something that can be done, and God will show me how to do it, or Mary will show me how to do it. And I always give credit. The soup kitchen, Mary showed me in a dream what to do, how to develop it in a unique way, different than most soup kitchens. Unique to a small town. It worked well for a small town. And it grew and grew. And I gave credit to Mary. They wanted a cookbook, and it was after I'd been run out, but I did it for them anyway. Took a lot of time, but in my foreword, I wrote, and I never put my name on things, ever. Even the grant I had to, but had to sign off that I wrote the grant for the schools, but and that got plagiarized. This one, I told you about that. He just took his name, put his name on to try to get more money. He didn't use the grant that I wrote for them properly. Didn't use the money for what it got approved for. So they lost major status in the town over that. They'll never get another grant from the Heritage Foundation or from Eli Lilly. So it was terrible. And I was put in a hot spot. They said, no, you wrote it. You're the one that's going to have to review. Are they using the money as they said? Do the children have the computers? No, this principal had used the money for things he wanted. He's a crook. And I kept warning the priests, wrote a letter to the bishop, and the bishop got action. He had a meeting with the priests immediately. You know, you have to meet with this guy every week and supervise him. And but then I was the one that was always blamed. They didn't like it. They resented because I have inner sight from God and I see through stuff. And if I'm shown things that are wrong, I speak up truth. And I've mentioned, maybe I didn't mention, maybe it was in the other video that I took down, but a Lutheran minister who I knew, years after I'd been in his church, I'd already been Catholic for quite a while, he got in contact with me after probably 15 years. He was in his 90s then. And he just was so nice and so happy to talk with me. He says, I always just, saw in you that you loved God so much. And he says, you realize you're a prophetess. And I said, what? I said, no, and no one had called me that. But oh, no, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Well, only from the standpoint I realized later. He passed away shortly after he called me. But that was back in the late 90s, I think. It was after I was Catholic, but maybe it's early 2000s. But it's because I speak up. Right is always right, but I am not in charge of the problems with this canon law being implemented willy-nilly. And it's too late for me to handle it. God's going to handle it. Too late for me with this person who just makes up things and then gets it so established that people think, well, this is how we're supposed to do stuff. And it's not necessarily. Just a human made it up. And a human who's not even being supervised by our own diocese, which is a big part of the law. It's supposed to be directed and guided by your bishop. And they've already interpreted that to mean, or his designate. Fine. But that person's diocese told me on the phone, they wanted nothing to do with the person. First, they didn't even think they had a diocese hermit. The person never told the next bishops who came after the one who approved her left. And so I just find that appalling. And so, yeah, if this is how it's implemented and how it is, I can't see that God would want me involved in it, or even with this person. And I've tried to get away, and I did until I fell back into it and thought, oh, I need to warn people that this stuff's all made up. It doesn't take years and years to be approved. Well, it might for me, or I don't think it'll ever happen. And I got rather direct about it, about the situation and how I felt like it wasn't a priority or even my life and vocation wasn't a consideration. Or there would have even been an email saying, I received all your paperwork, thank you. That's just normal when you apply for even a McDonald's job. You get feedback fairly soon. Fill out your application and they get back with you one way or another. So yeah, but they haven't done this. That's why they needed me to write the process. And I had the process of even said you should have an interview far sooner than this. I haven't even had an interview. You haven't even met me. A person shouldn't have to reveal a lot of their spiritual and personal Catholic life and other life and answer in-depth questionnaires to people that haven't even wanted to meet the person yet. And I don't think will. So I'm not worrying about it. I don't think I need to do anything more. I think I'm out of sight and out of mind. And the request isn't going to happen if the person who's charged with doing it can't multitask. So I'm praying for the person, praying for the young priest. He's a lovely young man. And from just the time I talked with him on the phone, very sincere, very orthodox. And I think he was bothered by I know he was, by my ecstasies. I told him that, that, and that I can't sit anymore to be at Mass. But, so, moving on. But I don't ever have to do anything. It's Catholics themselves that take me to the brink of the ridge and are ready to throw me off. I just walk through their midst. But it is amazing. The Protestants, don't leave us. The minister called, please come back, please come back. What we'll do? You have ideas? Whatever you want to do, we'll help you do it. And my Lutheran church, when I left California, they were sad. They had this big, huge going away party for myself and my children, and tears were shed. It's so different than, sometimes I wonder, was it the devil that tricked me? Was it God who brought me into the Catholic Church? I have wondered that, just because of how awful it's been for me, off and on. The ecstasies really threw them. I mean, they ran me out. Priests would tell me, you can't come here, you can't. Even in this diocese, I wanted to go to this, no, you can't come here. It's just sort of unbelievable. Is this, do they have the basics of Christianity, some of these people? I don't know. But I think they just know enough about mystics to be dangerous. They have enough knowledge of mystics and how they were mistreated that it's sort of like, well, we've got to do that too then. That's how you deal with someone who's different. You mistreat them. That's the only thing I've come up with that makes any sense, is that it's become sort of a practice, just like how some of them are implementing the Canon Law 603 has become a practice now. Automatically put on a habit and do er.dio after your name and call yourself sister or brother, and then go out and about and get your interviews or do whatever. Or if someone asks you to interview, I had a London, it was the Times or a major newspaper in London, contacted me when I was on the island through email and wanted to do a big piece on me for their paper and their online version, but wanted to use my name and have a front-on photo. And I said no. And my location, I said no. I said, I'm trying to remain anonymous. And I said, you could take a picture of the backside of me, and say I'm on an island, but not give the locale. And, we have to be able to photograph you, the front of you, and give your location and use your name. I said, well, I don't think God wants me to do this then. Thank you for asking, but no thanks. No, we don't have to agree to publicity. But as a Christian hermit, I have to really discern more what God wants. Really follow what God wants. And what the saint hermits, I have to ask they're on the other side, and they're right here with me. I have to just ask them to help guide me also. But I have to stay clear of being tempted to even warn people about the misinformation that you get online, particularly from a blogger. And I'd given the name of the blog yesterday. I'm not going to bother now. If you see it, you'll know it. And go by the canon law yourself. Read it and what the Catechism says, and study the early desert fathers and mothers and the early hermits. Study their lives and how they lived. Saint Fiacre, he was in the Middle Ages, or no, he was. He was in the later Dark Ages. Live as the ones who are saints and have great fruit. That's your best path for following and learning the hermit life from those who have great and holy fruit in their lives and who are deeply spiritual, deeply prayerful, and not into the temporal aspects, and very humble. Look for the very humble. And no one alive. Don't look to me. I'm alive. The jury's still out on me. I'm imperfect. I make mistakes just like I did yesterday. I'm still discerning the devil and trying to make sure I don't get entangled in the temporal external entangling nets. I'm trying to remember to swim out into the deep. And today it's swimming out to do a paint job for people in need. They're having a huge thing starting Thursday with lots of people coming, and they need their men's bathroom that's burned. God bless His real presence in us, and pray for me because I am in a strange position, very strange, but I trust in God that He would not allow it if He did not know exactly where He's leading me. And it's to God. Learning God is pure love at some level far beyond the temporal and the temporal externals, even of His church, of the temporal externals of His church. God must be calling me into the spiritual depths of His church, Holy Mother Church, not the externals and not the this and that nitty-gritty of externals and people and what they say and how they want to judge me or whatever. Judging is when it's not and calumny is when it's not based on fact. Detraction is when it's based on fact. It's still a mortal sin. And the person who went on a tirade about me, go ahead, watch my videos, and go ahead if you want to be in mortal sin and then detract me publicly on this other person's blog, and then incite her to go along and do the whole thing, detracting me too. Fine. But what I point out as warning, even though I took it down, was based on truth and just looking up and researching. And I pointed out in the video yesterday the different statements that were made and how they were false. They weren't factual. So you guys have to do that. You will do it. Most of you already know how to do it. But some people don't have critical reading, thinking skills, or listening skills to then jot down a few words or red flags and then Google it and find out, like a vicar general. And a vicar is always a priest or an auxiliary bishop, not a female. A vicar is not a female in the Catholic Church. But some of the more liberal dioceses are calling their vicars of religious who handle the female religious orders in their diocese, they're calling them vicar of religious. They are supposed to call them director of the office of consecrated life. They're to be titled director, not use the name vicar, because a vicar is always a priest or a higher level than priest even. So that was a fact. I didn't know that before. But when this person mentioned that she'd been instructed or worked with for 5 years with her female vicar of religion, I thought something, just a little red flag went up. Holy Spirit. And then I learned all this stuff about a vicar general and all the phases under of the different vicars: vicar of clergy, vicar of religious, men and women. In a big diocese, they'll have a priest do the men and a religious sister be what is supposed to be called a director, not a vicar. But details, who cares? Except if we're going to have these rules, follow them then. That's how I look at it, But I think some of the more liberal dioceses are calling them vicar of religious, the women, as sort of a peace offering for the fact that they didn't get to be women priests in Vatican II. So, but hey, that's how it is. No need to call someone they're not just to build up their egos that they're being called something that priests are. It just seems inconsistent to me. But I guess I notice things. I notice details. And when things aren't right, the Holy Spirit sort of like does a little flash in me. Check it out. And I do then. But it's so inconsequential to where God wants me that it's not my job to do cleanup and warn people that, things are not true that's being said. So what if they do them? I don't care. I mean, I do in a sense, but then my life, God is saying, is in another place and is not entangled in the entangling nets. God is taking care of them. He told me this back in 2005, and I'm to swim on out. So I'm swimming in paint today. God bless his real presence in us. Thank God for his real presence to guide us, to love us, and to have a place for everyone, including a mystic who is run out. Even, I think, here. I think it's not happening. I don't think it will. And I think my honesty is too much. I'm not a game player. I'm not just a blind yes person when it's something that needs a no. I'm not a no person if it's something that needs a yes. So I don't think people are used to that. There's a little different kind of a rule or protocol going on that I always think that God continuously has us grow. And I don't persecution, God's persecution, God can deal with his mystics. But I think people are used to reading these stories about burning Joan of Arc at the stake and stuff. And they felt bad after, but not bad enough to stop being awful to mystics. So let me tell you about it. No, I'm not going to. Have a beautiful day. God bless.